Hi everyone, it's Clea, your instructor for Writing for Digital Spaces, and this week I wanted to do something a little bit differently in terms of responding to your discussion forum replies. So this is me cooking up a discussion synthesis in which I share all of your reflections and my thoughts on them. I'd like to share an overall note that I hope will help all of us create some more robust posts. So when we think about gathering your ingredients, I want you to think about baking. And if you're not a baker, think about another metaphor that might make sense. For me, I do love baking, so if writing is the foundation, I see media as the icing, decoration, sprinkles, the candles that emphasize the flavor and make your finished product a little bit more robust and tasty. Some of you are incorporating images into your forum responses, and I would really love to see more of that. In our course, we've emphasized several times that writing for digital spaces, social media, is more about showing and not so much about telling. So make sure you use images, video, graphics to supplement your posts. Let's talk for a minute about equipment. I was hoping that Google Classroom would work as an alternative, but honestly, reading through the responses, it's not a very great place to have some of these rich discussions, what we're all looking for. So in the future, we're going to be sticking to NYU Classes forums. I'd now like to start a recap of your posts, highlights, things that stood out to me. And I'll be reading your posts out loud, so this video might be a little bit longer than usual, but I hope you're all right with that. I really want to make sure that not only are you taking the time to craft thoughtfully worded discussion forum responses, but I want you to really take time to read what your classmates are saying, because there's some great stuff going on. First up, Natasha. She selected the prompt, "You produced an exclusive video interview in which a celebrity reveals a long-kept secret." And Natasha says that in a situation like this, shares, likes, views, impressions, and clicks are surely the most valuable metrics. Those data points will provide almost everything you need to know about your production success. Especially being in video form, these types of metrics are reliant on actual numbers of engagement and true click rates, which means the video performance on a platform such as YouTube would be accurately measured by the number of views and clicks it generated. From the video's original post, offshoots can be driven to social media and, especially in the case of a celebrity, large followings can be attracted, and Facebook and Instagram view counters will also represent an accurate number of viewers who are able to watch your content. This isn't always the case for other forms of media, so I think the video platform and YouTube view tracker base is a true measure of performance. Impressions matter most, whereas Instagram favors liked content. So I think that Natasha's critical take on this prompt is great, but I would have loved to see more of a visual story here. And again, that's one reason we're reverting back to the NYU Classes discussion forum. I know that Natasha does an excellent job in terms of incorporating images from social media, and I really would love to see more of that. I agree with Natasha's take on the most valuable metrics, but I would also say it's important to consider passive versus more active forms of social media engagement. For example, in our lecture notes, we saw that shares take more effort on the part of the consumer and are therefore a bigger indicator of engagement versus passively clicking a thumbs up. Last but not least, I'd like to say that I appreciate Natasha's elaboration of taking this from YouTube to other social channels and tracking engagement on platforms like Facebook and Instagram. And I agree that tracking the viewership data and analytics, including perhaps at which point someone clicks out of the video, let's say they lose interest after 30 seconds, will be meaningful metrics for this execution. Well done, Natasha. Next up, we have Jarell, who chose the prompt, "You are debuting a new product and want as many people to know as possible." Jarell says, "The most important metrics to gauge how many people saw your new product would be shares, CTR, engagement rate, views, likes, comments. I believe these are the most important metrics for the debut of a new product because these metrics give you a good idea of how many people actually interacted with your post on your new product and how they felt about it. With the CTR, engagement rate, and views, you will be able to see how many people interacted with your posts in relation to your followers, which can be a good indicator for a company that is attempting to gauge how many people know about their product. Shares can also be a good indicator because the more shares you have on a post, the more people that saw it, because now your viewership expands beyond your own followers. Likes and comments are important because it can help the company determine how people felt about the product. Just because a consumer saw the product does not mean they have positive feelings about it or are inclined to buy it. Jarell, great synopsis on the most effective social media metrics. In taking this further and making a more compelling critical analysis, I would carefully weigh the impact of all of those metrics on the intended goal. For instance, CTR, or click-through rate, will be a much bigger indicator of consumer interest than views, which won't tell us much other than exposure and likes. Even a comment instead of a like, although it might not look that different on the screen, indicates someone took enough time to communicate digitally with the brand. I would estimate that on Instagram, for example, I have a 50-to-1 ratio of likes to comments when I engage with posts. If something captures my attention enough to warrant a comment, that's pretty powerful. Secondly, I love that you focused on shares because this is a way of having public awareness, or the public spread awareness of your product or brand into their trusted social circles. This helps in terms of promotion in an organic way that doesn't feel like the hard sell we get from social media ads. Last but not least, your classmate Teresa shared an excellent response to your post in which she suggested pairing sentiment analysis with a focus on commenting. If all of the comments are about how terrible your brand is, as I'll show you in a Twitter example that I just had to share with you all, that's not good. So let's jump to that Twitter example. BP, which was referenced in a recent reading about a successful ad campaign, posted a few different versions of the same ad on 2 different days with more or less the same consumer sentiment response. It is not good, and I saved screenshots to my phone to share with you. So one of these states, how do you get inner peace? And they want you to respond, tweet #driving or tweet #riding. And a few of the top comments here are, number 1, certainly not thinking about the Deepwater Horizon blowout. Number 2, by eliminating the fossil fuel industry. Second tweet, related to the same campaign, or the same style as they're showing on social media. What kind of music do you like to vibe to in the car? Honestly, an energy company, a gas company that asks me what music I like to vibe to, that already strikes me as very bizarre. But they want me to tweet #upbeat and happy or tweet #slow and moody. And some of my favorite responses here are, number 1, the sound of dropping a quadrillion gallons of oil into the Gulf of Mexico. Number 2, the BP thinks we've forgotten about the Deepwater Horizon spill, but we haven't mix. And number 3, songs about the environment and clean water. Pretty much all the things BP is against. So keep in mind, it is important not only to track engagement with your social media posts, but the consumer sentiment, and these are all very negative responses to BP. Funnily enough, the company is doing nothing to reply to these, which I think ultimately makes them look worse. Now let's talk about Amy's post. She chose the prompt, "You are debuting a new product and want as many people to know as possible." So same prompt that Jarell chose. She says, "The metrics that stand out to me as being most important are probably reach, engagement rate, and impressions." Amy says, "I think a company debuting a new product is most likely concerned with reach, both as a metric and as a concept. If we want as many people to know as possible, then there is less of a focus on the audience. The audience is everyone we can possibly reach, right? So here's where I, as your instructor, would say, maybe, and I'm going to elaborate more in a bit. Back to Amy's post, and more of a focus on a variety of means of outreach. Expanding to more social media channels can increase exposure, and therefore metrics like impressions are going to be really useful. How many people had the chance to view your new product, or post about the product, or commercial for it, or reviews, or whatever it is you may be sharing. Similarly, the engagement rate is going to be pretty important. How often are people engaging with those impressions? Knowing that kind of information can help the company decide whether or not certain social channels are working and can ultimately help determine the target audience for the product, I suspect, right? Yes, you are right on that one, Amy. From there, certainly metrics like likes and comments can help to get a better sense of audience sentiment, like Jarell said, but I think the priority is to reach everyone under the sun and then slowly narrow down the audience for the product. That being said, isn't retention and uniques the ultimate goal? When all is said and done, I think retaining customers and gathering longer-term exposure to the product is the plan. You want people to stay on your site long enough to see all the cool features of the product, not just to know that the product exists, I think, right? So yes, Amy, you don't need to doubt yourself. Absolutely right. If the ultimate goal is product sales, you'll need to focus on CTR, as Jarell mentioned. So to recap, Amy chose the same prompt as Jarell, and they've shared similar stats. While Jarell went specific with likes and comments, those are an example of reach and impressions, as Amy mentions in her post. As I mentioned in my comment on Jarell's post, engagement rate is important to track, and we need to look at active versus more passive forms of engagement to get a more robust picture of how our social media efforts are working. And ultimately, as Amy rightfully pointed out, we need to track longer-term engagement with the product, whether that's returning to the page several times, or perhaps even making a shopping cart and abandoning it. Side note, have you received those, "Hey, you forgot to buy this," shopping cart automated emails? I find them highly annoying, both for my attention span and wallet, but also quite effective, especially when they boost my likelihood of buying by throwing in a coupon. Next up is Emma. She selected the prompt, "You developed a user-generated content campaign and want those in the artist community to share their experiences with your product using a custom hashtag." She says the most relevant metrics here would be engagement rate, mentions, replies/comments, and shares. This campaign is user-generated, so the most important metrics are going to be those that require the most effort on the part of the viewer. Yes, amen, Emma. Mentions and uses of the custom hashtag in both original posts and replies/comments are going to be the most obvious measures of the campaign's success, as they are direct responses to the campaign's call to action. Your audience is the entire artist community, which transcends your follower base, so shares are also important here because they allow your content to hit new consumers outside of your direct followers. Emma does a great job here of summarizing the important social media metrics for a user-generated content campaign. In particular, using the custom hashtag is pretty much essential for tracking success of this campaign. I'd like you to think about any user-generated campaigns that you've come across, and they can be pretty hard to spot. But one example is the Billy hashtag Project Body Hair campaign, which they're using on several social platforms. And Emma is 100% correct that shares also have a huge impact here, because the goal is to reach the artist community, quote unquote, and that's insanely broad. Shares will help broaden the many overlapping social circles in what I imagine is this large, nebulous Venn diagram of artist networks on social media. Last but not least, Teresa. I'm not going to read Teresa's entire post to you all, but I did encourage you to check it out earlier in the week because it's a fantastic, well-researched, incredibly robust post. So Teresa, please don't apologize for going above and beyond. As your instructor, I get a real thrill in reading about how this excites you, and my goal is to create authentic activities and assessments that get you all jazzed about flexing your social media and creative professional writing muscles. This post gave me quite a workout just reading it, and I consider that a good thing. I feel mentally stronger from your thorough analysis. Honestly, consider saving this for your writing portfolio. Again, you went above and beyond. I love that you thought through specific strategies for each social media platform and even provided a few examples. For instance, the mayonnaise spreading made me smile, and also my husband would 100% buy into that. As a physicist and someone who loves mayonnaise far too much for any reasonable human being. So this concludes my thoughts and my discussion synthesis of all of your responses. Let me know if you like this sort of thing, because it did take a few extra hours on the weekend, but it's really important to me to recognize your excellent writing, to share it out loud, to hear it read out loud, and I love doing this. So thanks for listening, and see you next week.